And that is the only thing that you can put against her, because the way she has dominated the record books when she was at Iowa was something you cannot duplicate. She's a 3-time NCAA scoring leader.
Just because fans of Caitlin Clark will pay to see her play. Like, that's the reality situation. Is it's nothing to, there's never blame the consumer or the viewer for what they like.
Caitlin has exploded the game bigger than anybody else ever.
When ESPN left Caitlin Clark off their top 5 women's college basketball players list, they claimed it was because she didn't win a championship. But here's what's crazy. They put Oscar Robertson, Pete Maravich, and other men who never won championships on their all-time men's list. The double standard is so obvious it's painful. Clark shattered scoring records for both men and women, led Iowa to back-to-back finals, and transformed women's basketball forever.
But ESPN had this list of the greatest women's college basketball players of all time, as I just alluded to. And the way they presented it was something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely fun for us. It's fun for a lot of fans in the Midwest that, cheered us on.
Provided me a lot of grace, but always was there to be a shoulder to lean on and to really help me. I feel like I can continue to show up and be the same person that I am.
Yet somehow that's not enough. Let me show you exactly why ESPN's excuse falls apart when you look at the facts. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Let's talk about the most mind-blowing double standard happening right now in basketball. You know what's crazy? ESPN's treatment of Caitlin Clark compared to male players without championships is so blatantly unfair. It's almost laughable if it wasn't so problematic. Here's what you need to know. ESPN ranked Oscar Robertson as the number 5 college basketball player of all time. Pete Maravich sits pretty at number 3. And Ralph Sampson made the list at number 9. What do these guys have in common? None of them ever won a championship, not a single one. Yet somehow, they're considered all-time greats without question.
Because, first of all, the video, the thumbnail of the video, and the title is presented like this. Is Caitlin Clark the greatest of all time in college basketball?
When you talk about greats in this game, the Michael Jordans and the Kobe Bryants and the Steph Currys, they are putting her in that category, the Diana Taurasi's.
When we were in college, I don't know, it's cool, getting to see one of your best friends live out her dream and then play against each other by the same time.
The language ESPN uses when talking about these players tells the whole story. When discussing Oscar Robertson, they merely noted his lack of a championship as something that kept him from being ranked higher on the list, not something that disqualified him entirely. It's treated like a minor footnote, barely worth mentioning. But flip the script to Caitlin Clark, and suddenly, ESPN analysts claim the only strike against Caitlin Clark is that she has not won a national championship, as if that one fact completely invalidates everything else she's accomplished. Same company, completely different standards. You want to see the hypocrisy in action? Just look at Pete Maravich. Before Clark broke his record, Maravich was Division I's all-time leading scorer. No championship ring on his finger either. Did that stop ESPN from celebrating him at number 3 all-time? Absolutely not. They praised his scoring ability without hesitation or qualification. The viewership numbers don't lie either. More people have watched Iowa women's basketball games than many NBA broadcasts.
What makes a top 5 player? Winning. The only strike against Caitlin Clark is that she has not won a national championship.
Obviously, we see her shooting, we see her passing, we see all that stuff on the floor, but a lot of that comes from a lot of hard work. She's in the gym almost all the time working on her game.
If Caitlin Clark is on the team, it becomes the right team. Because Caitlin Clark is on it. It's like saying Michael Jordan's not on the right team.
Clark's impact on the game is undeniable, drawing unprecedented attention to women's basketball. Yet ESPN analysts acknowledge her statistical dominance, while simultaneously claiming individual accomplishments don't matter without a championship. It's like they're playing by completely different rulebooks. For men, it's all about individual brilliance. How many points you scored, how many rebounds you grabbed, how you changed the game. For women like Clark, suddenly team accomplishments are the only measuring stick that matters. The championship or nothing argument against Clark gets even more absurd when you look behind the curtain at what she accomplished with Iowa. This wasn't some powerhouse basketball program. It was Caitlin Clark and a supporting cast that would make most superstars pack their bags and transfer elsewhere. Let's get real about the talent gap here. While Clark was carrying Iowa to those back-to-back championship games, she had exactly one teammate who eventually made it to the WNBA. Just one.
And in some instances, teams chose to actually move games to larger venues to accommodate the fanfare of Caitlin coming to town.
Giving Caitlin, the kind of props that she deserves for bringing all these eyeballs and, the Caitlin Clark effect that we talk about, viewership, money, all of those things.
So this isn't about them. It's just about the idea that Clark didn't win a championship, so everything else is invalidated in the argument in a sense, to the point where you're dropping her out of the top 5 altogether.
Kate Martin was literally the only other Hawkeye who would go on to play professionally. One. That's it. Now flip the channel to the teams she was competing against. Remember Brianna Stewart at UConn? She was surrounded by a literal all-star team of future WNBA talents at every position. Stewart had the basketball equivalent of the Avengers backing her up, while Clark was basically playing as a one-woman show most nights. What's truly mind-blowing is how Clark elevated everyone around her. She wasn't just putting up ridiculous numbers. She was making her teammates better every single game. Their shooting percentages went through the roof when they played with her because defenses were so focused on stopping Clark that everyone else got better looks. That's the mark of a true legend. And the historic achievements are just ridiculous. Clark is the only player in NCAA history, man or woman, to lead the nation in both scoring and assists. Not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. Nobody has ever dominated both categories simultaneously before Clark came along, and she did it in 3 different seasons. Think about what Iowa women's basketball meant before Clark showed up. When's the last time anyone was talking about them on a national level?
And that is the only thing that you can put against her, because the way she has dominated the record books when she was at Iowa was something you cannot duplicate. She's a 3-time NCAA scoring leader.
Just because fans of Caitlin Clark will pay to see her play. Like, that's the reality situation. Is it's nothing to, there's never blame the consumer or the viewer for what they like.
Caitlin has exploded the game bigger than anybody else ever.
This wasn't some blue blood program with championship banners hanging from the rafters. Clark transformed this team from an afterthought into appointment television. What Clark did with Iowa is the basketball equivalent of turning water into wine. Taking a program with virtually no Final Four history to consecutive championship games with basically no help? That's actually more impressive than winning titles with a roster stacked with future pros. Let's be real for a minute. The debate about Caitlin Clark's greatness shouldn't even be a debate anymore. You know who agrees with me? Actual basketball legends and analysts who have seen it all. They're saying Clark's impact on the game goes way beyond whether she has a championship ring or not. Think about it. What Clark has accomplished is changing the entire landscape of women's basketball. Arenas that used to have empty seats are now sold out. People who never watched women's basketball before are suddenly tuning in to see what all the hype is about. That's not just success, that's cultural revolution. The truth is simple. Decades from now, basketball historians won't be talking about ESPN's takes or ring-counting debates. They'll be talking about how one player from Iowa transformed the entire women's game. That's Clark's legacy, championship or not. And real fans know greatness when they see it, even when some sports networks refuse to.